I'd like to have the meeting come to order. If we could get the roll call.
Chairperson Bertrand, Vice Chairperson Prowse.
Pardon me?
I called your name. Could you just
I hear.
answer? Thank you. Member Bolus?
Yes.
Member
Here.
McKenna?
Here.
Member Sonata? Quorum is present.
Okay. Our chair, Michael Bertrand, was unable to be here today. He actually had a doctor's appointment in Reno that came up. So you're stuck with me. Item 3 on the agenda is public comments and discussion. The public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Carson City Audit Committee. In order for members of the public to participate in the committee's consideration of an agenda item, the committee strongly encourages members of the public to comment on an agenda item during the item itself. No action may be taken on a matter raised under public comment unless the item has been specifically included on the agenda as an item upon which action may be taken. Are there any public comment? None noted. No requests. Item 4, for possible action, adoption of the agenda. I will accept.
I move to adopt the agenda as submitted.
Second.
Okay, the agenda is adopted. Item 5, for possible action, discussion on the Audit Committee's role to review the city's comprehensive annual financial report with the city's external auditor and the Audit Committee liaison, and to make possible recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. We have attached to the agenda package a copy of the Carson City Audit Committee Municipal Code section. That's Chapter 2.14. And since this is mostly an issue that relates to my interest, this has been an issue that's been floating around for, I guess, a year and a half as to how the committee can do its required review of the financial annual financial audit. We had in the past have identified a liaison who, from the committee, Mary Sonata, who was to interact with the external auditors, Kafuri Armstrong, and then report back to the committee relative to whatever issues she may think are appropriate or necessary. She is unable to be here today. She's out of the country. And actually, I don't know what she has done in this regard. What we as a committee have a responsibility to get involved in the annual financial audit process. According to our municipal code, within the agenda, a portion is quoted. The Carson City Audit Committee will review and make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors regarding the annual financial audit. And on page 4 of your attachment, under item 3, it provides some additional detail requiring the responsibilities of the Audit Committee. Says the external auditors are required to alert Carson City Audit Committee and the governing body regarding material matters. Last year, in effect, that's what Kafuri Armstrong did in a brief presentation to the committee. But continuing, the Carson City Audit Committee will review and make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors pertaining to the external auditor's annual audit plan and inquire into external audit matters as deemed appropriate. Item B, oversee the appointment of the independent auditors to be engaged for external reporting and establish the related audit fees. Review and evaluate the performance of the independent auditors and establish a regular schedule for periodically rebidding the annual audit. We have to have set such a schedule. And item C is to review and make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors regarding all significant written communications between the independent auditors and management, such as any management letter or schedule of unadjusted differences. Now, these responsibilities are generally required under generally accepted audit standards, and I have copied them. We've got roughly 80, 100 pages of this stuff that's within the external audit requirements. Appointing a liaison, I think, addressed some of these issues, some regarding our interaction with the external auditors still remain to be addressed. And I've come up with some possible suggestions as to how we could proceed. First, just wondered if our other committee members have any input or concerns on this issue?
Is anyone from Kafuri here? No.
Okay. My thoughts here, and I'm expecting that we will maybe need to go into our next meeting on to address this, but one option would be to have committee members briefed one or more times during the financial statement audit. This is above and beyond the liaison. And the briefing would be by Kafuri Armstrong, the external auditor. Another option would be to, and this relates to the annual presentation of the draft that goes to the audit committee, then is referred to the Board of Supervisors. It's been a concern, at least of me, is that we don't have the option to review it yet. Presumably are expected to recommend. The thought here would be that the auditors, external auditors, provide the material information. As mentioned, they already do, and for us to pass on the report with no other action. And then once the department, the Board of Supervisors has accepted the external audit, then ask the Department of Finance to perform some ratio analyses and other evaluations of the issued financial statements. I have a list of ratio analysis and other questions to be asked. All this would be relative to reporting to the Board of Supervisors. Another one of our responsibilities is to how to address the financial condition of the city. And in fact, what does the financial report actually tell us, and tell us the citizens and the Board of Supervisors? That falls, I believe, directly under the responsibilities of the Audit Committee to provide such advice and information to the Board of Supervisors. A third item was to continue having the designated committee member to be the primary contact point during the entire financial statement audit cycle. And at that point, when the audit committee is next year, hopefully that evaluation could then be provided the committee at our meeting when we discuss the annual financial audit. The objective of our audit, of our agenda here, was to seek discussion and possible direction regarding their role in dealing with the external auditor. So I guess at this point, either if committee members or our Director of Finance would have any thoughts or opinions on those suggestions, I'd love to hear them.
Well, you know, for the record, Nick Providenti, Finance Director. So I'm looking at the actual municipal code, and I'm not sure that, I mean, I'm looking at it and basically the audit committee, I mean, the external auditors are required to alert the audit committee and the governing body regarding material matters. So I have not been alerted of any material matters as of yet. And then it says the audit committee will review and make recommendations to the board pertaining to the external auditor's annual audit plan and inquire into the external audit matters as deemed appropriate. Oversee the appointment of the internal auditors. Okay, so we'll be doing that, you know, at the beginning of the year. And then review and make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors regarding all significant written communications between the independent auditors and management, such as any management letter or schedule of unadjusted differences. So to me, I would think that, you know, once the Board of Supervisors receives and accepts the audit report, because this is Kafori Armstrong's report, it's not our report,
Right.
It's their report. You know, I would think after that report is accepted, then if there's any issues, then we should bring the issues to you, and then you should accept or reject our answers to the issues, and then we forward those to the Board of Supervisors. I mean, that's kind of the way I'm looking at this. But, you know, I'm not sure that, you know, we can get into, you know, doing ratios and doing all these other significant things. I mean, I guess we could do all that kind of stuff, but I'm not sure that that's what this is addressing. I mean, it could be, I guess, if that's what you would like. But to me, it's dealing with that C regarding the recommendations of the written communications between the auditors and management. I mean, that's the way I read it. So I'm not really sure how any of the other members of the committee are reading it or what they would like to do. But the problem that I'm having is that I don't want to make the document public until the board accepts the document. And then once the document, it's their opinion of our financial statements. So there's really not anything we can do or not do. I mean, we can't really sway them. We can't say, we don't believe you. You know, I mean, that's kind of what, you know, my thoughts. I mean, it's their opinion on our financial statements. And then if there's issues that they believe need addressing, then I think then maybe we come back to the audit committee and say, this is what our plan is to deal with these issues. Because typically we have to address those issues to the Department of Taxation per the statutes within 30 days. We have to have a plan of corrective action on all those issues that our external auditors tell us. So, and I'm just not sure, you know, timing-wise, you know, if just, you know, the board has to accept, you know, the report by December 31st, and then we've got 30 days to go ahead and get our responses to the audit issues to the Department of Taxation. So, you know, you would have to meet between those two times, or we could just, you know, basically provide those answers to the, or provide our communications to the Department of Taxation, and then come to you folks, and then go back to the board. But I don't know, the timing is what I'm having problems with.
Well, part of the issue we're trying to address now is the need to provide the Board of Supervisors the draft without having it become a public document until they accept it. And the prior years, the auditors have come to this committee and basically identified any significant issues. They've they've come across, and then say briefly what they've done. So what I'm suggesting here is we have a narrow focus on just that issue. They come in, report it to us. The whole package goes to the Board of Supervisors. We then have the option or the duty to evaluate what the annual report, the annual audit is telling us as a city subsequent to the Board of Supervisors accepting it. In other words, have that be part of the analysis and then the ratios and the other stuff that we've got. You know, the Department of Finance would then provide that kind of information to the committee.
And that's fine. I believe that's, I mean, we didn't really do any of the analysis subsequent, but I think prior, last year, that's basically what CAFORI did, if I'm not mistaken. They came before the actual comprehensive annual financial report was presented to the board and kind of gave a presentation and outlined some of the issues. I mean, we could do that. We'd have to schedule another meeting in December.
No, I
I
don't think we'd need a meeting in December. This review analysis, you're telling the committee your take and information relative to the report.
Would be done subsequent?
Right.
Okay. No, that's fine. I mean, I think that's fine. It's just, I mean, CAFORI hasn't finished the actual audit, so I don't know if there are any issues, what they are. So I'm not sure if you would want them to come back before it goes to the board. It's going to the board in the second meeting in December 18th or 19th or whatever that day is.
Right, and
So I mean,
you know, we then have a period ultimately, I guess, of potentially a couple of months after
Okay.
that to at least be relatively timely in terms of what our presentation to the board would occur. See, this process would also, I think, make a little more clear what our audit liaison would be doing, which is interacting with the internal auditor prior to their report,
right.
but it would address questions and concerns as they come up. And then we also have the responsibility to report on the budget. And so during that same period, then we would be using the financial statement and budget information so that we can make some kind of report to the budget. And then we get back into the audit planning. So it's basically
Have a cycle.
a cycle with different pieces. But at this point, I feel that the audit committee should undertake a little bit more involvement in that process. And that's what this intent to create this process is. Do our committee members have any?
I agree, and I think 2.14.040, item 1 and 2, talk about working with the auditor to do risk analysis. And I think with the liaison approach, that can be accomplished.
Does our internal auditor have any input or insight relative to this issue?
Mark Sturank of Moss Adams for the record. I think what you're discussing makes sense in terms of being able to look into things, after the board has received and approved it, so the subsequent timing, and then being able to work through the committee's liaison in terms of communication, up until that point. So I think that makes sense.
So I'm just trying to understand some of the timing. So basically, what would happen between now and the end of the year, the board would accept the CAFR, as they normally do in December. And then once that becomes public, basically, then the liaison kind of step in? And I know Mary has spoken with Dan Carter. They did have a meeting. I wasn't privy to the meeting, but I know I basically set it up. So they met, it was the first week of field work that before it was there, second, third week in October. but I'm not exactly sure, what came about. But I'm just trying to figure out what we need to do. So we would have the board accept the audit. Within 30 days after that period, we would send our recommendations, and the board, I believe, has to accept those recommendations as well, of any, communications of any, issues with the audit. The board will accept our responses to their issues. We'll send that on to the Department of Taxation. And then after that, what would happen?
Whether we need the liaison to do that, or anyway, somebody on the committee would provide you a list of pieces of information we would like to get that would be help us analyze the impact of the information in the annual audit relative to the city's financial condition. And I see this as a evolving process. We haven't done anything quite like this that I'm aware of before, and so I'm thinking it'll take a run through a couple of times to see what works best. But I would certainly think we would want to see the report to the taxation in response to that, if that's appropriate. I mean, it's not confidential.
Well, no, it's a public document.
Okay.
Right, so it'll be, I mean, we have to have the board actually approve the document within 30 days after the audit is accepted by them. So we'll either bring it back, I can't remember last year if we brought it, if we actually had the report the same day as the audit was accepted. I almost think we did. I think the board accepted the audit, and then we had, as another board action right after that, the plan of corrective action that the board accepted. I don't know if there'll be any issues. I suspect there probably will be one or two issues, but I haven't really heard anything concrete from the auditors as of this point. But that'll be the process, and then once that's done, we're basically, it's a public document. So, we'll probably give you an actual copy of the document. And then you can, basically do what you want, or you can ask us questions. I guess we can have a meeting after that. Whatever would work, I guess.
Yeah, one thing we would have to do as a committee, I guess, is come up with a set of questions. I have some at this point that we put together, some with the help of our internal auditor. And so in terms of how fast the whole process should work, it doesn't seem at this point particularly onerous, but it would provide that we would actually be looking at the financial statement and trying to put together information that would be useful for the board and the citizens.
Okay. So maybe we go through the process, and then at the next meeting we can have another discussion about what you actually want from us.
Sure.
Once we actually have the document, and then I suspect it'll, like you said, it'll take probably maybe a full cycle, I suspect, before we kind of figure out what we actually really want to do, which is fine.
Yeah.
It's
It's not critical, but it is a responsibility,
Sure.
as I read our code, and we should be performing.
Right.
So,
No, I understand. So I think we'd be fine with that.
good.
So
Does the public have any information or concerns? I don't see any. Now, I don't know. I don't know if this is a kind of thing that actually needs to be passed and approved, or whether we can proceed with it as is. I don't know. I'm open to.
I believe, we're clear on direction at this point. Basically, we'll go through the process. Once we get the document at the next meeting, we'll try to agendize something to discuss the comprehensive annual financial report, with the committee. Then you can we can have a discussion at that time on what you'd like to see, or if you have questions on any, of the numbers or anything like that, if that's the direction.
Is the board comfortable, or committee
I see
comfortable?
no need for formal action at this point.
John, okay. That was item 5. That was item 5, and then on item 6, we have a discussion and update on the assessment of internal controls. Our Moss Adams representative, Mark Steranka, will be discussing and providing updates on the status of that assessment.
Thank you. Yeah, mainly, just wanted to give you a brief update. We really just got started. The plan was to start in November and finish up in February, being able to come back to you either in February or March in terms of the audit committee presenting our results. We just started interviews yesterday, and actually just wanted to bring your attention to 2 members of our team that some of you may not have met, Laura Peth and Scylla Outcult, and they have been doing interviews with primarily Nick's team, but not exclusively with Nick's team. And so just getting started, going great. So we'll do a series of interviews. We'll look at documents. We'll do some process walkthroughs. And just as a refresher, I'm just going to read some of the areas that we'll be focusing on. And again, this is intended to be an enterprise or citywide internal controls review to get a sense of key controls across the city. So payroll, purchasing and accounts payable, monthly account reconciliation and closing, cash receipts and handling, which is a decentralized activity in most cities, and I'm sure it is here, revenue and billings, accounts receivable and write-offs, grants management and compliance, and IT controls, general controls. And so not exclusive to those, but those are areas we focus. That's a reasonably standard sort of drill areas of focus in a municipal government, city or county. You happen to be both, of course. And so we'll be coming back to you with findings, recommendations, but in a little different format than you're used to. Instead of findings and statement and information and recommendation statement, we'll actually be presenting to you a matrix, sort of a master matrix, addressing each of these areas, and just to sort of set some expectations, if you can visualize. So we'll have a control objective. So say in payroll, any one of the areas, we'll state what the control objective is that we've looked at. We'll identify any control issues relative to that control objective, and that in essence is our finding. We'll have recommendations of what the city can do to resolve any control issues. So there are recommendations, just in a different format. And then we'll identify the type of deficiency. And as most of you know, there are 3 categories: a control deficiency, a significant deficiency, and a material weakness. And those are in graduating levels of severity. And so that will become sort of a roadmap for the city, in essence, in these areas of where there are opportunities and need for strengthening. As far as coming back to the audit committee, it'll probably present some ideas or suggestions for additional areas of internal control work where we might, as we've talked about before, sort of dive down a little deeper in particular areas depending on what we learn. And we might find some areas are, man, they're solid, and in other areas, oh, here's some opportunities for improvement, and through our findings or recommendations, what those are. But just wanted to sort of, A, let you know we just got started, we're on track. B, what you can expect come February for the one of you who will be here then. And yeah, strange meeting, right? Actually, all 3 of you are technically going off with one renewing. So anyway, that's a brief update. Questions? No?
No, I'm glad to hear you're making progress.
We're off and running.
We're big believers in internal controls in here, so I'd like to see some good recommendations.
Yeah,
I'm sure we will.
it'll be good. And again, just as kind of a refresher, and we have the same sort of scenario going on with other cities, counties that we play the same role as. Here, we've had a focus primarily to date on what we would call performance-related work. We haven't really called them audits, but forget the term. We've been focused on different aspects of performance within the city. And so in coming into this fiscal year in terms of an audit program, our recommendation was, well, we haven't really attended to internal controls here. It's a good foundational piece of information for the city to have a sense of what the level of the understanding of the utilization of internal controls are. And so this will be, good reference foundational material moving forward. So anyway, yeah, question.
Just so the people watching on TV understand what we're talking about. Over the last 4 years, because of the economic problems, we lost a lot of people in Carson City, laid off, et cetera. And I think that's probably a good thing. But now that we're starting to move into a different economic level, things have changed. It's a good time to look at what you're doing, to see if what you're doing will take you into the future safely. And that's what you're doing, is you're looking at safety, whether or not things are being reported right, whether or not the information is accurate, that sort of thing. And so that's why this study was contracted for. And it's probably something you should do every, 5 years maybe, 4 years, just to make sure that as people move around jobs, as jobs change, as ways of dealing with money change, credit cards, et cetera, you need to look at how you control things. And that's what Mark's doing.
I would think, based on my experience, as you get into internal control environments, you will find operations that are well operating and those that are not. And I would expect that we may need to contract, if you will, for some more in-depth work down the line if you identify locations that need more definition as to what needs to be done.
Likely, I mean, not a certainty, but for example, we had sort of had that discussion in terms of our budget for this year prior to the efficiency study being added, which is the next agenda item. We had I think it was 20,000 set aside as a to be determined in anticipation that we might have an area or two to delve into more deeply. So yeah, that's, but we'll see.
Any comments from the audience? Okay, thank you. And we'll move on. We'll move on to item number 7, discussion update of the employee efficiency study. And again, that's Mark from Moss Adams.
Yeah, so we're, in contrast to the internal controls review where that's just getting started, the employee efficiency study, we're nearing the completion. So first, a quick update for you and then a few comments about the results. So from a status perspective, again, process was similar. Interviews with individuals across the city. I think it was actually 15 different departments and or elected officials. Their groups like the assessor's office, clerk recorder, et cetera, treasurer. Interviews, at least at a department or elected official level, in some cases, depending on the complexity and scope of the department, maybe a layer down. This was called for by the board. It was really to look at I'll use the term reasonableness of staffing across the city. As we explained to the board when we sort of signed up for this, that is relatively high level, because ultimately when you're really trying to evaluate staffing, especially when going down to a detailed level, that's really all about level of service. And this was not a level of service study, which would be a much bigger undertaking. But yet you can still get a sense of staffing levels depending on the type of business that the city is in, the organizational structure, history of staffing, looking outside of the organization to others. And so lots of different points of reference can be had, plus just bringing experience of working with lots of other entities. And so that's in fact what we did. We looked at the reasonableness of staffing city as a whole, and then within each department. And then really two elements of our deliverable. First, a citywide slice, and then a department-by-department slice, and then we looked at staffing within each, and then we looked at other opportunities for efficiency and effectiveness improvement, which are showing up in terms of findings and recommendations. And in one of our discussions with the board before we actually got started, one of the questions was, what else will you be looking at when you're talking to folks in terms of staffing? And what we said is we would be as holistic as we could be, looking for any and all types of opportunities for efficiency and effectiveness gains while we're there. Just get as much bangs for your buck as you can. And so we in fact have that. We have staffing level analysis, and then we have other findings and recommendations that we think either can affect staffing, just can affect efficiency, like leveraging technology, which doesn't mean it will, for example, an area that says, well, leveraging technology means you can do it with less people. In this particular case, leveraging technology can allow you to do things more efficiently and get more done, for example, and actually utilize the people more effectively because you're leveraging technology. So a couple macro comments about, I'll call themes. We're going to be reporting the results to the board on the December 4th meeting. The plan is to come back to the audit committee in our next meeting, which I'm guessing is probably going to be February, and we'll actually present the report to the audit committee then. You might ask, is that out of sequence of what we normally do? And I would say yes, but this being a board requested project, even though it's gone through the audit committee process, wanting it to become public with the board. This is in a way similar to the CAFR discussion, public through the board first, and then we'll come back to the audit committee, report back just as we normally would, and assume that there'll be the typical discussion in terms of implementation plan on the part of the city in response to findings or recommendations. So just some overarching comments or takeaways in terms of the results without getting into too much detail before it goes to the board. One we can say is certainly in general, overall staffing within the city is reasonable. It's reasonable in terms of level of staffing and in terms of structure of staffing. There are a handful of exceptions to that. In some cases, they're recommended additions of positions. In some cases, they're recommended reconfiguration of positions where, as an example, there may be more managers and less analytical or technical staff than what would best help individual groups to deliver their services. There are two cases where we talk about that. The department directors agree, right? There's a concurrence in that. And so that's a reconfiguration on a very small scale, very targeted on a department by department level. One comment that we'll share when the report is delivered and the numbers are visible in terms of staffing levels and then ratios. One of the things we looked at across the city as a whole and within departments is span of control. How many people report to another person at each layer in the organization, which is just one indicator, and it's not, if a span is high or low, that doesn't mean it's good or bad. It's all circumstantial. One of the things we'll show is that at certain levels in the organization, mainly at the lower levels, the overall span of control is relatively low. But there's really good reasons for that, and I'll mention some of them. And this is why you have to be very careful when you look at numbers or compare to others. It's what's behind them, and because that's what tells the story. And so some of the things that are I won't say unique to Carson City, but are important considerations when you look at analysis. So one is your integrated city-county. So you're kind of providing the maximum number of services that are possible, right? Because you're doing the things that a city would do, and you also do some things that a county would do, where in a case, some cities might outsource those to a county, for example. So that just means you have a full suite, your full service. And you layer that in with, you're a small organization, you're a small community relatively, you're a relatively small organization in terms of total amount of people, so that translates into, if we have a lot of different services, we probably end up going to having a reasonable amount of small groups providing those services. We don't need 50 people doing a particular service, we only need 5. And so in that case, all right, so you have a manager and 4 direct reports, so you have a span of control of 4. Well, technically that's on the low end. Does that make sense in that particular situation? Of course. You have other contributing factors to low spans of control, which are, you have what we would call working managers and supervisors. So it's not just someone who's managing people who are doing all the work. You have relatively technical people in managerial and supervisory roles who are managing a group, but they're also doing the work. They're working. They're rolling up their sleeves and doing some of the same activities their teams are. And so that can contribute to smaller spans of control. And then finally, you're going to have some instances where just a high level of technical expertise, whether you're working managers or not, is that you have smaller specialized groups serving the needs of the community. You're not going to just suddenly, well, we need to have a better span of control, so we're going to hire a bunch of more people at this level to make that look better, right? No one's going to do that. And then just one last contributing factor, and that is, we actually looked at your staffing. One of the elements of our staffing analysis was looking at your 2008 staffing versus your present staffing, 2014. One, to just get an understanding of the amount of change or reduction, and 2, being able to look at where that reduction happened. Because we had, in our time here, heard a lot about it, but never really looked at the numbers. And what we learned was that a lot of those changes, although we don't have a mapping of positions, change from then till now, because obviously things have migrated, people have been promoted, positions have been refilled in some cases, but most of those were down at what we'd call the staff level. And so director level stayed about the same, the manager and supervisor level stayed about the same, and most of the reductions, although not a huge number, were down at the administrative level or staff level, which also contributes to, well, if your span of control from management to staff was X, and the bulk of our reductions were down at the bottom, that's obviously going to also contribute to a smaller span of control between those two groups. So all very reasonable, all logical, all contributing factors to something that on the surface of it, if asked, so how does this look? How does that compare to a best practice? And you might say, well, comparison to best practice, it's a little bit low, but here are the contributing factors why it's low. And as you would expect also within a government, you have areas that have a larger span of control. In public works areas where you have a supervisor supervising 12, 15 people, and then like the other examples I gave, you're going to have very focused small groups who are doing specialized services that you just don't need that many people, and so you have a small span. So I've now told you a lot in essence, but that's so you can have an anticipation of the themes that will come out of that. And I think we've identified a number of good opportunities for the city in terms of efficiency and or effectiveness improvements through our findings or recommendations, that a lot of which, as we would expect, generated from the folks that we were talking to, and how could they do things better. So,
Okay.
questions?
Well, thank you, Mark. Why don't I go with the public first, if anybody's out there interested in commenting? I don't see any hands. Staff? Nope. Okay, committee members.
Mark, the only thing that came up during your discussion was reconfiguration versus your internal control study. All right?
Mhm.
If you're going to reconfigure, then you have to look at internal controls for that new configuration, not the old one.
Possible, not necessary. It depends on really whether either the process changes or if management controls were to change. So for example, to sort of make your point, if you reconfigure staffing and a management control that existed yesterday that doesn't exist tomorrow because we shifted that position, those responsibilities, yes, then you might need to change a process relative to a control. If it's just a matter of the same duties are residing at one level and we're just doing less of a particular type of duty, let's say that's not related to a control, and doing more of a type of activity that's not related to a control, then that shift doesn't necessarily impact control. So it kind of just depends.
Yeah, I'm just commenting on the fact that I don't want to obsolete the internal control study.
No, we won't do
Because-
that.
I'd like to ask you a question relative to the
Sure.
tracking system. I'm presuming that the intent is to put the results of this study in our audit
Oh.
tracking system?
Yeah, I would assume so. I mean, we will have findings, recommendations under our sort of mode of operation. That would make sense that would get added to the audit findings tracking report, which is, I believe, what you're referring to. In that, it would follow the process of, once it's gone to the board, assuming that the board accepts the report, that there's an expectation of the board to, we'll say, the city manager's office, that an implementation plan is prepared to deal with what the city manager's office thinks they should be dealing with.
Good. Well, that segues into item 8. That segues into item 8. Discussion regarding monitoring of audit findings, response tracking report, and possible direction to the internal auditor report, and discuss the monitoring with the Board of Supervisors. We've also got attached a memo to the City Audit, Carson City Audit Committee from Roger Morlandorf, Parks and Rec, and we can discuss that. Regarding the audit tracking report, that's not actually, yeah, that's in our package, right? And I'd noticed relative to that we have the fleet utilization study is complete. Is that correct?
Correct.
So there is no remediation plan reflected like there is on the fleet efficiency study. We don't have Public Works here to discuss this, so I guess. Oh, good. Could you come and let us know what the status of the remediation study is? Thank you.
Thank you, Darren Schultz, Public Works Director, for the record. I have with me today our Operations Manager, Curtis Horton, and I also have with us our Fleet Supervisor, Zach Good. Zach is going to provide the specific updates to where we are currently. As I spoke to you last time, this is a work in progress, and we're definitely making steps forward as we continue. Ultimately, we don't feel like we're going to be able to put any numbers to what efficiencies we have come up with until we get completed with everything and we get some tracking to where we can start tracking and compare it to what we had before. But with that being said, we'd like to go through the recommendations one by one and give you an update as to where we are currently and kind of what we're working towards in the future. So if that's acceptable with you, I'd like to invite Zach forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, if I could ask that, although we don't necessarily need numbers, but if at the end of this process, if you could go ahead or today and start entering the data in those boxes.
Okay, on the,
It's toward the back of the agenda.
okay.
Do you not have a,
Yeah, we're not sure who's going to do it. Was Mark going to do that? After I mean, we're kind of talking about through the process.
Right.
Because we're basically, we're gonna kind of go through Public Works' actual, basic plan on what they were doing, and then,
We're more than happy to enter the information. So
Does that information get entered once the recommendation is completed or during the progress, or what was the intent?
Well, there are multiple aspects of the report. So for example, I'm looking at the chair was commenting on the remediation plan. So I think what Zach's going to cover. So for example, if you say, okay, for this recommendation, we're planning to do X, then we can enter that information as that's your remediation plan.
Okay.
At a point in time that's completed, we can indicate that it's been completed.
Okay.
If there's any potential cost savings associated with that, in the future,
Right,
as you
right.
mentioned, we can enter that.
Okay.
So,
Very good.
Yeah.
Yes, we will.
thank you. Welcome.
Hi, good evening. Zach Good, I'm your fleet supervisor for Carson City Public Works. So as you know, we have some changes going on to accommodate this study. We have some recommendations that we're going to go through. There will be several recommendations that I will defer to Darren Schultz because he can answer them. They're a little bit more on the financial side. He will do that at the end of what I have to discuss with you. So recommendation 1 was to redesign the main shop and support better workflow. We're currently underway with new construction on the expansion of our fleet building, as well as we did a little bit of a remodel in our current facility to facilitate a little bit more better ergonomics for our mechanics. Recommendation 2, schedule the preventative maintenance workload for the entire year. We've completed this with our new software system. Recommendation 3, redesign preventative maintenance checklists to reflect appropriate manufacturer inspections that are applicable to various classes of vehicles and equipment. We've completed this as well with our new software system. Recommendation 4.
Excuse me a second.
Yes.
I'm a little lost. Is this recommendation 4 we're talking about, or?
he's actually on the fleet efficiency study, which is
Oh.
the couple pages after the utilization.
Oh, okay. Good. The other question I had is on the estimated cost on each of these. Do some of them, you have estimated costs? It helps give a relative impact to the readers of this document.
As for what we're saving or what
No, estimated is what the cost to address the finding.
Like for example, the software package. I assume did you purchase a package?
Yes, well, I'll have to refer that to.
We don't need it immediately. It's just information to provide the internal auditor.
Yeah, we can provide that information.
Good, thank you.
So back to recommendation 4, base service intervals according to vehicle manufacturer recommendations. We are currently doing this, and we're putting this also into our software. One of the basic things that we've seen is changing some of our service intervals. It's a direct savings in labor and parts. It'll take time to develop all that information to give you an actual savings from one year to another. We'll have to compile some data. Recommendation 5, develop a dedicated service request form, incorporate time reported and estimated time of repair and actual completed. We have this all in our new software system as well as in the shop, we're running it more like a dealership, that when a customer comes in, they have a face to bring their complaint to. It's filled out, it's put into the computer system, it's time dated, and it allows to increase our wrenching hours. Recommendation 6, hire a full-time storekeeper to perform all parts-related duties. A dedicated storekeeper would free up mechanics and focus them on their best use, which would be wrenching. This position is not necessary and would be very difficult to fund. I mean, we'd be having tried to add additional staff. It would be easier or even better suited to add an additional mechanic if we're going to spend that money.
Excuse me for interrupting.
Yes, sir.
I just, not very smart in this area. Do the parts houses deliver?
Yes. Yep, all of our parts houses deliver to us. We've streamlined that process to where no mechanic has to leave the shop to go retrieve a part, as well as reorganization of our inventory and adding locations. So when the mechanic goes into the computer and looks in the software, he can look up his parts. He knows if it's in stock or he knows exactly where it's at.
Well done, well done.
So, and that just kind of goes into, with the small size of our shop, we don't need it. We can take care of ourselves. Recommendation 7, issue a request for proposals and award contracts for vendors to provide fleet parts with set prices and delivery criteria. The contract should be for 1 year with 2-year extensions if the supplier satisfactorily meets all of our conditions. With our new software system, we're able to track our parts and our costs more accurately. As we get this data compiled, we will actually start going out to bid for parts. At this time, it's an informal process, but it is very competitive. I bid against all my parts guys to get the best service and parts prices on quality parts. Recommendation 8, include parts tracking and inventory. This is done with our software system as stated before. We're able to actually track this more accurately, so that we know where the parts are, how much they cost, and if we have them in stock. Issue an RFP to award, recommendation 9. Issue an RFP and award a contract to provide fleet repairs and service with local vendors and set prices, delivery criteria, warranties. The contract should be for 1 year with 2-year extensions if the supplier satisfactorily meets all conditions. It's not practical with the diversified fleet that we have. We have so many pieces of equipment. Nothing's very standard, everything from a cop car to a fire truck. It's very difficult to just drop it off at a dealership and have them understand the complex internal systems that they work on. Another thing that will equate to this is we choose our vendors based on turnaround time of their repairs, their cost efficiency, and also the quality of their work. We inspect their work when those vehicles go out and they come back into service.
Could, on this one, you're saying that in the remediation plan, several of the repair types you could possibly do this with, and others you could not. Is that correct?
A majority of them we could not do it with. A small portion, yes, we could do it with. It would be a very small portion of the standard vehicles, but a lot of our larger stuff requires specialized vendors to do it. So we couldn't just go to 1, 2 vendors to take care of all of our product. We have a diversification that we use probably about 15 different vendors to repair products that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Recommendation 10, integrating our fuel data and our CFN reports. We are doing this, it's underway with our current software system. This will allow us to track our fuel consumption and cost as per vehicle, as well as utilization of the vehicle, how many miles we're putting on it a year, and also, when its oil change is going to be due. So this will help us, but it's in the works as we speak right now. Recommendation 11, I will defer to Darren. After I'm completed, he'll go over that. Recommendation 12, adding a swing shift or overlapping shift to better accommodate schedules of fleet customers. This would obviously incur adding additional staff. We don't have the funding for that. As well as a lot of our local parts houses don't support basically running a swing shift time. Recommendation 13, create a fleet manager classification and fill the position with a person with qualification experience to manage the fleet operation. That is completed.
Back on the other one, the swing shift time,
Yes, sir.
does that cause you any problems,
As in,
not having the swing shift?
not at this time.
Could I just ask, relative
Yes,
to
sir.
that, what hours are you open?
So we're open from 7 in the morning to 5:30 in the evening, Monday through Thursday. And we are able to accommodate most of our operations with that. We also have an on-call mechanic who is rotated through all the mechanics. They are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
And you are shut on Friday then?
We are closed on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Okay, thank you.
So recommendation 13 is complete. They've obviously hired me as your fleet manager. Recommendations 14 through 16, I will let Darren Schultz address. Recommendation 17, conduct a basic utilization review of the entire fleet, requiring departments to justify the need of each piece of equipment and its assignment. Moss Adams recently completed this utilization study and accomplished this recommendation, and we will continue to evaluate our fleet year to year. Recommendation 18, it will be another one that Darren Schultz will address, as well as recommendation 19. Recommendation 20, discontinue practice of performing non-fleet work for city departments. This is kind of in reference to our fabrication work being done for other departments and our shop. We've discontinued this practice pretty much. We have outsourced it if we need to get jobs completed. But if occasionally a situation arises where we do need a fabricator, we do have the ability to fulfill that. And a perfect example would be on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, or even in the evening when we're running snow plows. We have occasionally broken snowplow frames or large pieces of equipment and needed someone to weld it, and we have the ability to take care of those situations. Recommendation 21, I will defer as well to Darren Schultz, who will cover that. Recommendation 22, develop service level agreements between fleet and each of its customers. This recommendation refers to providing customers with options of service levels, basically washing, vacuuming, waxing, picking up and delivery of vehicles. This could be very costly. We've considered it, but we can't do it. It doesn't make sense to have a mechanic picking up and delivering vehicles or washing vehicles. We do use other alternatives if we have trustees or interns to clean and take care and detail vehicles. It's at no cost to the city.
Excuse me. So in
Yes.
this case, the other city departments are not sending vehicles for that service to you?
No, it is even in our operating policy that people that operate their vehicles shall wash and keep them clean.
Okay, good.
Recommendation 23, establish performance measures and monitor them with the goal of measuring performance against industry and shop standards. We do support this recommendation, and we're moving forward with it. As we start to compile data and start increasing our efficiency, we'll be able to compare ourselves with other sources. And then recommendation 24 is another one that I will defer to Mr. Schultz. Do you guys have any other questions for me?
Sorry you had so many.
No, absolutely not. No,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Before you go,
Oh,
Yeah.
it's just one of those catch-all questions. What would you change if you could change things?
I would like to at least add 2 to 3 more mechanics. That is one of the most important things, that we are very understaffed at this point, taking on the current fleet and its size. And then also, we have vehicles that are aging, so they do require more maintenance and more time.
If you had more mechanics, would it save us money or cost money?
It would make us more efficient, but it would probably add more to your bottom line of adding mechanics. That's adding salaries.
Darren Schultz, Public Works for the record, and we'll get Zach back up here if we need to. I'm very, very, very excited to have Zach here and filling this role. I feel like we've made some real progress on this, and trust me, this is not the end. The sky's the limit. And this is just going to continue. I'm going to report on a few of these recommendations, mostly because they deal directly with the financial side of things, and it's a case where Zach has no say or input into it. For instance, recommendation number 11 is hire 3 additional mechanics. And just as you mentioned, John, that we would love to do that, but at this point we're being told that there's just no funding for that. So we've just, that's on hold until we get other direction from City Hall and or Board of Supervisors.
So you'd hire 3 more mechanics, and that would make your operations more efficient,
More efficient
but at a cost.
at a cost, right? You really, that recommendation has to go hand in hand with some of these later recommendations that I'm going to get into. You wouldn't necessarily just do that. You would also, as we get into these later recommendations, you would replace your fleet at an interval that is much shorter than what we currently are doing.
Okay, and here's the basis for my question at the end. Basically, do we add more tax revenue, take more tax revenue from the public, and have a more efficient city? Or do we have a more inefficient city and not have and leave the additional tax revenue with public?
I think that's a Board of Supervisor question.
Thank you, I'm looking for an answer.
Maybe after the meeting.
Okay, Mr. Schultz.
Absolutely.
Relative to the information that new information you're generating through the software and the other processes, do you anticipate being able to use that information in helping to justify the cost savings and efficiency
Absolutely.
improvements
Absolutely.
to eventually,
Right.
for lack of anything, hire the three guys?
Right. We will be able to qualify that number, that request, as this goes forward because of our tracking ability to show, how much time or how much downtime is a squad car over in our services. If we can track that on an ongoing basis, we will be able to come back with a cost analysis that says we know this in our heads, but we'll have the numbers to come to you and say, we're wasting money by keeping these squad cars that are, 8, 9, 10 years old and 150,000 miles on them because we're spending more money on repairs and they're down more than if you spent the $30,000 to purchase a new one.
So our $60,000 question is, how long would you expect it would take to generate enough data to reflect improvements?
I'd like to answer a couple of your questions and then answer that last question as well. With compiling our data, we'll be able to show the efficiency of the mechanics. Optimally, it should be around 70%, but if we can start showing that the mechanics are billing out about 90% of their time or they're 90% efficient across the board, all the mechanics, that will show you in a number of that you need to hire another mechanic. You have mechanics that are running at full capacity. As well as for your vehicles, we will be able to track and show how much parts and labor that we're putting into the vehicle over the year. So you can see an upswing and trend in vehicles later in their life. So it'll show you a first 5-year picture versus a 10-year picture to show you that in the first 5 years of the vehicles, they cost you X amount per year to maintain. In the later 5 years of these vehicles, it'll show that it's increased by 15, 20, 50%. We're going to be able to track all those.
So we're looking realistically at a year or two before you
I
have the
figure
data.
about 1 year for at least initial results, 2 year for very accurate results.
Okay, good, thank you.
So as we continue, these that I'm going to comment are you'll see are really related, and most of what we've talked about are somewhat answered. Recommendation number 14 is to incorporate more realistic replacement intervals, as well as salvage values, auction fees, and that's what Zach was talking about, and I was referring to is building this database so that we can determine how much we're spending on these vehicles on a yearly basis moving forward, and with a recommendation to, surplus them and get something new because we're losing money. Recommendation number 15, adopt a methodology to support the replacement of vehicles and equipment based on optimum economic life point. Exactly what I talked about, what you do with your own car. I mean, if you're year after year, you're putting more money into it, eventually you get a new one, or you get a better running used one. Number 16, establish a vehicle equipment replacement fund to which customers contribute to replacement costs of units over time. This is something that ultimately we will be working with City Hall and Finance on as direction, and as funds become available to start reinvesting in this fleet fund to turn our vehicles over quicker. That's the bottom line on all of these things is we're going to, just because we're putting all this information into our database and coming back, we're we're already familiar with what the results are going to be, although we're kind of at a, a range, but this data is going to basically tell us that you're keeping your vehicles too long. And the problem with doing that and that result, bringing that back is that's great, but that costs money. It's got to come from somewhere.
Excuse me, I sort of forgot, how much was gained from selling the excess vehicles?
The surplus vehicles that were in the report that said that we were to sell, I believe, did we have an estimate of those at an auction? It wasn't, we just had an auction recently.
It's not a major problem, I was just curious.
I can answer even just what our last auction brought us, $73,000 for our surplus vehicles. And there will be probably there's another auction in April, and there will be another section of vehicles going, and then we'll bring us back even a little bit more money.
But those weren't just necessarily all cars. I think one of them, there was a big,
Across the board.
yeah, there was a big sewer compactor. I mean, it was a huge.
It was a camel.
Camel, was that
So
what it
that's
was?
used
Right.
for running our lines, but that at the end of its useful life, it was
Right.
getting very expensive to maintain.
Right.
As well as we had a 10-yarder that also fetched us a pretty decent amount that was same idea, past its useful life, and parts were getting hard to get for it in
Right.
source. So
Yeah, we have a pretty unique fleet. I mean, it's not just cars. I mean, there's all,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, all kinds of crazy
yeah,
things
the
that
cars
we
really don't net
service,
us that
right.
much. It's some of our other equipment that nets us a little bit more, so.
Recommendation number 18 falls on the heels of just what we were talking about, develop a comprehensive and accountable chargeback system. Are you guys seeing a theme here as to these recommendations? And we're going down that road, and ultimately it's going to be some hard decisions that are made above our level as to, if we want to, how we want to reinvest in fleet. Recommendation number 19, develop shop labor rates and markup charges by appropriately allocating labor and overhead costs, including the function. So this is a work in progress based off of our new software Zach alluded to earlier, and once we can start gathering all that data and put it in the system, over time we'll be able to look at that shop labor rate as to really how efficient are we. That's what it all comes down to, and we want to get that shop labor rate down to something that's industry standard that is acceptable. And so that's our goal moving forward, and like Zach talked about, moving forward in the next year or two, we'll look at it, we'll get a number as to what it's costing us per hour, and then work at getting that to where it should be. We have recommendations of where it should be. And then going on to recommendation 21, establish a vehicle equipment committee whose main task is to develop comprehensive administrative policies for vehicles and equipment. And that number 21 kind of sums up all of these, especially these financial recommendations and moving forward as to what, how we should be moving this city forward. The city manager is aware of this, our finance director is aware of this, and we're in the process of trying to develop what this committee would look like, or if it's part of a existing committee we have in place that also oversees this type of thing. And so we're not rushing to do this, because until we have some data to bring forth, we don't want to get this established until we're prepared to bring stuff to them. But over the next year, this will be established.
Would that committee be within Public Works, or would it be within the entire city?
I think the intent is for it to be across the city, being that fleet serves across the city. We want to make sure that everybody is represented there. There would probably be a Public Works representative on that committee, but other than that, yeah, it should be across the city and run out of the city manager's office, I would think. So that concludes our responses to the recommendations as to where we're at and a little bit about where we're going. And we can work with Moss Adams as far as updating that into the matrix so that we have that, and then we'll continue to provide updates to you.
Good. Your status report, in effect, as this largely is, there is a spot on our little form here for status comments. So if you do have, and you've made a lot of progress, that column would be appropriate to use, and you don't have to mess with the stuff you've already done.
Yeah, a few of these we can say complete and hopefully not report on them again. So in the future, should we do that just there and that and that would be our status report? Is that where we kind of want this to go, or do you want us to continue to come before you?
I don't know, what's the committee feel?
Well, since there's going to be a different committee here next year, I think you ought to ask them.
Okay, we'll do that.
Do you have any?
I think you've done very well, and I think it would be good to continue reporting. Any good news is always welcome.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
We did have one other question here, as that was under the fleet utilization study. Has any remediation plan been put together for that yet? Am I talking to the right guy?
The fleet utilization study, the fleet efficiency study came out of the utilization study.
Mhm.
Is that right?
Vice versa.
Or vice versa? So, no, I don't,
Well, in essence, you've done some of it in that you've surplus vehicles. I mean, the intent, so when we went through the efficiency study, number one, so I think you guys have done an awesome job. So from our perspective, lots of progress. If you really look at the efficiency study, it really had two things. One is things that you could do, in essence, within your own power with low to no cost. And priorities were getting Zach on board and the software, because with those two things, those were needed really for everything else to be possible. If you recalled in our report, we had some language at the end of the executive summary that there were a number of recommendations that would have significant costs to them. And those were the items that Darren was referring to, which, if they're going to happen, they're going to come in the future. And so it seems to me you've gone about it just the right way. And then just back to the utilization study. So when we went through this, we're like, okay, so now we're saying in order to do things, there are costs. How are we going to pay for them, right?
Right.
And so the utilization study, the twofold intent there was, A, try to make your fleet more efficient, but B, find a way to pay for some of the things that need to get done in the efficiency study. It's wonderful to hear that you were able to generate some revenue for that. I don't know if that directly paid for anything, but in terms of fleet expenditures. But anyway, so obviously you've taken some action
Right.
on the utilization.
right. Yeah, I guess it's, lower hanging fruit that what we can do and what we can change ourselves right now. But yeah, this isn't going away anytime soon.
Yeah, and that's what I think is also very appropriate. Fix what you can quick and set up a process to fix the bigger stuff. And that's, your remediation plan actually, to fill in that category, would reflect that, you're working on stuff on the efficiency study that will apply. And there may be some stuff that will relate directly. So it's kind of fill in the box. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, so, public have any comment? So we're, let's see, we had, also have a report submitted by. Thank you. We also have a report that was submitted by Roger Mollendorf. And I don't know if the other committee members have had a chance to look at it, but it looks pretty good. Have we got any comments from the committee? And obviously, it's been there for the public to look at also. I'm not seeing a lot of interest in this. I understand there's are you comfortable, Mr. Internal Auditor, with the status of the community facility study?
Yes.
I didn't see it. Is it in this package of stuff? The very front one.
It is what in the package, sorry?
That's the summary,
Are you looking for the report or Rogers?
the tracking sheet.
I
No,
think,
there it is.
I think it's right after that.
Okay.
I don't have the packet.
Okay, have there been any issues or concerns? Again, we don't have any estimated costs. But it seems he's doing pretty well, right?
Yeah, so a couple of comments there. So one, I know he was interested in reporting back to the committee progress, both in terms of things that, as Fleet was reporting, things that they can do sort of within their power and things that, either would require board action or just funding, right? That, or costs that they can't cover at this point. So the only comment I was really going to make was we have not reflected what's in that memo into this report yet in terms of updating, so that needs to happen. I guess I would say as the same as the Fleet. And what we'll also ask Fleet is to provide us feedback relative to the mediation plan for the utilization study, which you had pointed out. So there you go.
So there are some recommendations that are going to require board action?
I believe so. I'm not having them top of mind, but I believe there are some relative to, so as an easy example, raising a fee. And some things, those fees are, I believe, set by the board. And so, yes, that would require action of the board. I don't know if that's the exact right example, but things of that nature.
It's not a bad example. The other example would be, what's the priority of Parks and Rec, this building, et cetera, for the city budget? People pay money in taxes. They expect to have facilities. Some expect police and fire. Some expect to have a theater. I think that's a political discussion that needs to take place. It hasn't because there was no money. It'll impact this study dramatically. Give you an example of the joint use agreement with the schools. Probably one of the few communities in the nation that have such utilization of schools and schools utilizing public buildings. The public builds one building, it's used by all entities. It's an old-fashioned concept. Is that a good concept? Should we shut the schools out of the city buildings? Once again, you're talking political.
And this is something that I don't have an answer to, but might it be worthwhile to indicate within our tracking sheet which recommendations would need action by the board and not leave it sitting on the department head when there's really nothing much that department head could do or the city manager can do. That would require some, how does it said, careful discussion. But
I agree. Quick comment there. So certainly that's something that could be noted within the remediation plan. I think that's also where that should come to the surface is, so if there was an implementation plan relative to each study, so in essence we sort of just heard one from Fleet or an update of what their implementation plan was. In that implementation plan, coming back to the board from city management should be, well, to do these things, we need you to take action on the following. And so that's another mechanism. I'm not saying that it can't be in here, but that's certainly a place where that's where that dialogue specifically needs to happen, where the board says, okay, we've adopted the study, management put together an implementation plan for how you recommend tackling what's said in here in the report. And again, they're not going to agree with everything or do it just the way we said, but they'll also identify some things where, hey, we need the board to make a decision this way or that way in order to be able to move forward with some of them. So that's where it also should show up.
The other factor is that when you're dealing with these particular things, community facilities, there is another citizens committee that has purview over this, not this committee. So these recommendations may or may not be citizen recommendations. They may be just this committee's recommendations. So it's dealing with parks and the theater and the swimming pool, et cetera. There is a lot more citizen involvement than just this committee. And so I would suggest that perhaps that's where the source of input as to what needs to be done is going to come from, not from staff. And tracking it may or may not be a useful endeavor, because who knows what those people want to do.
It's an interesting concept, and if we're going to make the tracking process useful, I think it would be something, if we do have other committees or other entities that are involved in this process, I think they should be identified. I mean, we're not an island.
Absolutely, and I would just take that right back to an implementation plan. I mean, there's implementation plans about what steps need to be taken, and in some cases, those will involve other organizations, entities, committees, et cetera.
And since I sit on Parks and Rec, I can tell you that they've got a master plan that's thick, it's old. Question 18 money is mostly Parks and Rec. They have a longer history of trying to provide recreational facilities, or, for lack of a better word, community quality of life facilities to this community longer than probably any other group. And that history, give you an example of the community gymnasium, the MAC. That's being built with quality of life money and also 1/8 sales tax. That's been on the books. That is a taxpayer voted for activity or building that the taxpayer said we wanted 18 years ago. And it's just starting to get built now. So, efficiency is one thing, but history is going to be, especially when you're dealing with Parks and Rec, something that needs to be taken into effect. So I don't know that you can really account, or the community utilization probably does not have enough information in it to account for what the community really wants.
Okay, we've got, I had one other point to raise relative to the tracking report. It would seem to me that the findings within the annual financial statement audit should also be reflected in the tracking report, so that there'd be one location to find out what the status of stuff is. Is there any concern with that?
No, I agree, and in fact, where we fulfill the same role in other municipalities, that's exactly how it is. That's sort of the repository, regardless of the source, whether they're internal or external.
This isn't on the agenda. I don't know if it's appropriate, just if there'd been any activity in the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline. I should ask the attorney, is this a problem, my asking that question?
I apologize. I've been working on something else. What was the question now?
Whether I can say it's not specifically agendized. I was just curious whether the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline has received any complaints.
So long as the body doesn't deliberate towards a decision in that area and it's simply an attempt to gather some information, there's no concern by this office with the potential violation of the open meeting law.
Okay, good. Thank you.
inconsistent with that guidance. Yeah, just a quick status update. We've, since our last meeting, I believe, received 3 inquiries. 2 were reports via the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline, and 1 was actually a direct email to the internal auditor. All 3 were not fraud, waste, and abuse situations, and so 2 of them were forwarded to the city manager's office to deal with appropriately and in due course, and 1 was forwarded to the treasurer's office, because that's where they both made sense. It was, I think, good that the individuals availed themselves of those tools. I mean, they don't necessarily know what meets the definition of fraud, waste, and abuse or not, and so I would say, so the process worked. In fact, the process, as we defined it in the policies and procedures, worked. We received it, we forwarded it in a timely manner to the appropriate individuals within the city management. So,
Well, thank you. Our last item on the agenda is our next meeting. There's been a suggestion of February 11th, Wednesday. I understand our internal auditor has a conflict on February 10th and 9th. Of course, I'm the only one who's liable to be here, so that's good for me.
Works for me.
I was going to say option, neither of these, both of these work, so it doesn't matter. So the 11th, which as you mentioned is a Wednesday, the following Tuesday, which is the 17th, if we wanted to stick more to Tuesdays, it doesn't matter.
At this point, you will be driving our meeting relative to what you have done. So which would work better for you?
I would recommend you stick with Tuesdays because of the TV schedule.
That's as good a reason as any. And in fact, I would probably suggest the 17th, just to give a little bit more time, not knowing exactly what the convenience of the timing will be with concluding the internal controls review. So, a little bit more time is always better than a little less time.
Okay, so we're all okay with February 17th at 3 p.m.?
Mr. Chair, did you want to go ahead and schedule any more meetings for the year? I was kind of working with, the scheduler here for this room, and she suggested, maybe we schedule quarterly meetings, or, I don't know, I think we had these meetings on the calendar kind of every quarter, and I don't know that we've actually, kept that meeting, so I don't know if it's a good idea or not. I mean, it's just something that she suggested. If we want to, the room is the problem sometimes.
Right.
Is the only issue.
Well, our current chair likes Tuesday afternoons, and I think most of us have been able to work within that area. In terms of how frequently beyond that, I think it might be appropriate for me to wait until we've got our hopefully new or entire body to address that.
Okay.
That's actually probably a good idea.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and try to schedule the 17th. If there's any issues, we'll let you know, but we'll just assume the 17th at 3.
Great.
Okay.
But I think getting on the calendar for the balance of the year, I think that's a good idea.
Well, we should just ask for every Tuesday at 3 p.m.
Yeah. I don't know who will get sick of each other first.
So we're going to wait until next February to come up. Good. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Is there public comment?
Oh, public comment. I think we've led them away. No more comments. Now, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, sure. I move we adjourn.